My 63-year-old dad destroys my family to date my 20-year-old friend. My dad was abusive to me my whole childhood, but I just thought that was normal. In the past 3 years, he's not been able to work due to an injury that happened at his work, so my mom had been working 7 days a week. During that time, my dad would try and do horse lessons as we lived on a farm, and he had been riding horses since he was young. He had been giving my friend horse lessons since she was 13. When she turned 15, she started being my father's intern and coming over to work horses with him every day. As she got older, she would go to horse competitions with him and stay the night there. This was all happening from the age of her being 15. Me and her were still friends at that time of her being 15, but my dad would not let me ride horses when she was around as he said I was just showing off, when really all I wanted to do was hang out with my best friend. Looking back at this now, I think this was his way of being alone with her. We drifted as we got older, but she would still come to my house every day. About a year ago, we found out that Dad was seeing another woman, and was leaving us. When we tried to work out the financials, he was horrible, threatening to call lawyers and sell all of our stuff for little to no money to ensure that my brother and I and my mother would have nothing. About 6 months after the divorce, we found out that he was seeing someone. And that person was my childhood best friend. Which gets me thinking that he most likely liked my friend even before she hit the legal age. I tried to talk to my father about everything, but he wouldn't admit it. I ended up having to contact her to find out the truth. She had been telling everyone that my dad knew about their relationship, practically shouting it from the rooftops. But apparently my dad was still trying to hide it. I just can't get my head around the fact that my dad didn't have the guts to tell me the truth. When I confronted him, his only excuse for this was that celebrities do it, so I should be fine with him doing it as well. I then told him I don't want him in my life if he is going to be with her. He decided to block me and make sure I have no way to contact him. I just can't get over the fact he destroyed everything, my whole family, made us sell my childhood home. All for a girl he's known since she was 13. I got in contact with her as a child, because our fathers were best friends when they were kids. I don't know how her family has reacted to this, as they are horrible people as well, and have caused my mother and I much stress. I know some people will say, he groomed her, and I just haven't come to the conclusion mentally. It's so difficult seeing my whole family fall apart because he was selfish. There's more to the story, but I don't know how to say it. Sorry, this was so long and might not make sense. I just needed to tell someone and maybe get some reassurance on the way I'm feeling. People whose life sucked, what did you do to turn it around? It was when I was a teenager. I was a short, kinda fat, nerdy kid with acne, braces, and long, greasy hair like Kurt Cobain. For some effing reason I cannot, as an adult, fathom, I decided I wanted a perm to look like Gavin Rossdale, except I was still a kinda fat kid with a kinda fat face, so I just looked like a fat kid with shitty, dirty, curly hair. It was effing terrible. Now, before you hit reply and bang out the same bullshit that I hear all the time when I tell this story, everyone goes through an ugly duckling phase, you're no different, hear me out. I was not your average ugly duckling turned swan. I was a 1/10. I was effing hideous. Like, girls wouldn't audibly say ew if I so much as smiled at them, sometimes if I just made eye contact. It was debilitating for my fragile teenage psyche, and extremely humiliating and emasculating. I couldn't even get my friend girls to hook me up with any of their friends. My teenage personality didn't help anything. I was one of those attention-seeking loud kids who made horrible jokes and hoped people would laugh with me instead of at me for once. Seriously, I was a effing greasy, pimply, fat, loudmouth little troglodyte. That was my life for 3 years, from age 12 through age 15, a social outcast, a dweeb, a dork, a loser, throw all of them at me cause there ain't nothing new. When I started my first semester of my sophomore year in high school, I was taking smart kid geometry or trig, can't really remember which. There was a jock in my class, a kid named Jay, who wasn't really smart enough to be in the smart kid classes, but was probably too smart for the regular classes, so here he was, struggling along with things I found easier than a tutorial level in video games. Through some twist of fate or good fortune, or most likely because our last names start with the same first 2 letters, Jay sat behind me in that class. Let's call it Geom Trig because I've wanted to use that portmanteau since I wrote out geometry or trig earlier in this story. Jay wasn't above cheating, and I wasn't above whoring out my brains for a pretend friend, so we got along like cupcakes and frosting. About a month into the semester, Jay asked me, hey, optical delusions, you ever had a girlfriend? Up until this point, Jay and I had never talked about anything other than how awesome he was at everything or Geom Trig. I didn't really know how to respond. I mean, I obviously hadn't had a girlfriend, but that's not the kind of information you let out easily when you're on the bottom tier of the high school food chain. And no, girls don't really like me. I squeaked out, trying to keep my normally loud voice hushed to a whisper without cracking. Puberty is the effing worst, dude. When do you get those braces off? Jay was staring at my face, judging every crack, every pockmark, every pimple, everything. I could feel it, but it didn't feel the same as when the pretty girls would do it. He wasn't reeling in horror for starters, and he seemed to be inspecting me instead of rejecting me. In about a month, but then I have to get retainers, and depending on how my palate expander worked I may knee stop. Dude, don't talk about your braces, and no one cares. I never did know when to shut up. Oh right, ha 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 ha, sorry Jay. My already red from the acne and topical creams face turning a shade of beet. I was overcompensating for oversharing by over-OF it. I was really awkward. Can you get a ride home an hour after school ends? His inquiry seemed earnest, and didn't feel like he was going to tie me to the flagpole or give me an atomic wedgie. It felt like he wanted to help. I prob up. Yeah, why? Come to the weight room with me after school. Football team does weight training and we're allowed to bring in one underclassman outsider to try out for a couple weeks. If you make it, you can try out for the squad next year. I don't know how to work out. The forced grin had disappeared from my face, replaced by a half frown of dejection. Knowing full well that I could barely lift myself up on the chin-up bar more than twice, I wasn't going to fare well in the weight room with kids twice my size. Don't worry dude, I got you. And he slapped me on the back hard enough to half knock the wind out of me. I smiled at him, not forced this time, it felt real. All of it felt real. Over the next year, I got the braces off, cut my shitty hair, and hit the gym so effing hard that I went from 150 pounds of squishy preteen flub to 165 pounds of rock effing solid muscle and under 10% body fat or some shit. The jocks started giving me high fives in the halls. I was dubbed the leprechaun, because I'm short and I like green, a novelty, a not so dorky anymore skater kid in a flock of jocks. Today? I'm 31 and married to one of the sexy cheerleaders from the class below me. I have a good job, a beautiful baby girl, a lovely house, a fluffy dog, and by my own set of standards, my life is effing great. I was in university and was pretty badly depressed. I was on antidepressants, never went to class, I was failing the few exams I actually sat. I put on a shy load of weight and never left my room except to go to the bathroom or to buy more liquor. It all came to a head when I tried to hang myself in an abandoned brick factory but was so fat, I broke the beam. I sat in the dust for an hour or so and decided she needed to change. I dropped out, got a job as a framer and started saving money. I worked 16-hour days for the next 3 months and saved every penny I earned and bought a plane ticket to the US. I worked in North Carolina for 3 months at a summer camp. I made some great friends, dropped about 50 pounds and started feeling better about myself. The kids were awesome for my self-esteem. It was a huge camp and out of 450 staff, I was chosen as their favorite counselor. At the end of camp, I packed up and moved to Canada to play rugby with a cousin I hadn't seen since I was 12. I dropped another 50 pounds and by this time, I was thin, attractive and had an accent. The attention I got from women really gave me the boost I needed and made my depression seem like a distant memory. So in August, it will have been 10 years since I left New Zealand. I'm now married with a kid on the way, I've got a good job with a future and my wife and I are celebrating our 2nd year in our own house. Life is finally good. Make every day into a non-zero day. Non-zero can mean whatever you choose. If you're a student and the pile of work is so immense you can barely stand to think about it, get the paper out and write your name. Bam. Non-zero day. If you're unemployed and can't imagine starting a job search, pull up Monster in a different tab and leave it there to stare at you. That's non-zero. Depressed and can't face life? Take a shower and put on a nice outfit, and you've got your one for the day. If you're pulling yourself up one non-zero day at a time, it gets easier to face the big things, to make the next day a non-2 or a non-3 day, and get 10 things accomplished. Non-zero days. That's the start. I quit doing heroin. I'm not talking some teeny little once-a-week habit but full-blown $300 a day habit. I'd probably done it for 3 years at that point. I was sitting in my car waiting for the dope man one day and was short on money and the thought crossed my mind that I could probably suck his pee-pee for it. It'd done terrible things but never prostituted myself and the second that crossed my mind and I seriously considered it I was horrified and disgusted at myself. Saw a mental picture of me in 10 years as a ragged toothless dope whore and I just drove away. Went home and locked myself up and lived through pure hell for a while but by God I did it and I did it on my own. I took that unstoppable drive to score and turned it into an unstoppable drive to stay clean. I screwed up along the way, sure, but I didn't touch heroin again. I'm still not where I want to be and don't know if I ever will get there but I'm anywhere near where I was. Not by a million miles. I do not judge a man by how high he climbs but by how high he bounces when he hits bottom. General George S. Patton. What made you convert to Islam? It all started with the Beirut explosion. When I saw the news I immediately thought, well, it's the Middle East, so most likely a bomb. Obviously, with time we all learned that it was not a bomb, but still the news really left me troubled. I had this question in my mind, why can't people in the Middle East have one good year, without news like this? As I said before, to me it was all just because of the religion, kind of Muslim people deserve this because their religion is bad and evil. Thankfully, I have this thing, I cannot just get one picture, I crave information and I needed to understand, so I decided to start by learning more about what I considered the main issue, terrorists and their religion. For the next 3 or 4 months I didn't stop reading and learning about terrorism and war. Of course, very rapidly I came to a conclusion, Muslims were innocent. Yes, terrorism is an issue but there was a bigger picture there, as we are all aware I believe, so I'll skip this part. At this point I decided to separate terrorism from Islam and I decided to learn as much about Islam as I could. I started reading the Quran, started watching Islamic content to get that point of view too, Omar Suleiman, Mufti Menk, East London Mosque, Yaqeen Institute, Bayana Institute, Numan Ali Khan's lectures, Ali Dawah, Smile to Jannah, everything I could. In the middle there were 2 highlights, Omar Suleiman's debate with a rabbi and a priest, and Joram van Kleveren's story, the Dutch politician who reverted. I started noticing the bias, you never had imams or sheikhs defending Islam on TV, the disinformation. To make it even worse I did not only open my eyes about the socio-political questions but simultaneously Islam was answering so many questions about faith, it was crazy. I always knew there was one God, but I felt like I had never had some actual guide to worship, a guide about purpose, a guide for a good life. At this point, I was kind of confused. All of a sudden the worst religion in the world started making much more sense to me than anything else in my life. And everything I knew before was a big lie too. Also, I really admired the way the religion was preserved and taught. Even today, the one thing that I admire the most is tafsir. Every detail of the religion is curated, revised and taught. After 6 months of reading and hours of videos and lectures, I just couldn't keep hiding it from myself. I was ignorant, but I thank Allah for having mercy and showing me the way. Anyone who believes that Islam is evil, they've been misguided. May Allah guide us all. I was trying to understand terrorism and war in the Middle East. Of course, as an average Western guy, my first argument was, it's probably this crazy religion of theirs. So I started by learning more about Islam right away. Brother, that argument fell apart really quickly, and now it's not their religion, it's also my religion. May Allah guide others and open their eyes, as it happened to me. Allahu Akbar. Was raised Catholic in a Western European country, but became an atheist during my teens. When I was in my 30s, started questioning life, looking for meaning. Felt like there had to be something more. Life without God had started to feel unbearably empty. Looked into several different religions and philosophies. Was introduced to Islam by Muslim friends. Was always impressed by how much strength they got from their faith, something I never got from Christianity, even when I still considered myself Christian. Inspired by them, I started reading the Quran and went to the mosque with them. When I started actually praying like a Muslim, something clicked. Islam just feels like the perfect way to worship Allah, to feel closer to Him. It doesn't feel at all like praying as a Christian used to. I actually long to pray now, can't wait until the next prayer time. Can't explain it really. Islam fills a hole in my soul.